Thank you for joining us today on the Moms Who Know podcast, the podcast for moms who know that when they take care of themselves, they can take better care of everyone else. Today, we are talking about parenting. And one of the best things that you're going to learn today is the idea that parenting is not about how your kids turn out. It's not about their behavior. It's really about us. It's about the way we as moms show up and about the way that we are setting up our kids' environment for the best possible outcomes. So you are going to love this episode and learn so much. Let's get to it. Hello and welcome to the Moms Who Know podcast. I'm your host, Chanel Nielsen, and my guest today is Ann Kaplan. Ann, thank you for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Chanel.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to learning from you. Ann is talking to us all the way from Spain, where she is living with her 4 children. And Ann is a parenting expert. She provides parenting support from conception to college. And one of the things that she does, in addition to helping moms to be with the whole birth process, she also helps moms, and I want to read this because I really like the way it's worded. From time management to learning discipline techniques when kids are getting out of control, her coaching helps moms create the family energy and room to be themselves within their families. I love that. I think that is what we're looking for as moms, but sometimes we don't even know how to say it, and we don't even know exactly that is what we're looking for, but I love that idea. And so we're going to talk parenting today. And so to start us off, Ann, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your parenting, the real deal. We want to hear what it's really like in your family.
Well, as you said, I have 4 kids, so it's complete and utter pandemonium many times. I'm really proud of how well our family works together, but it definitely wasn't always that way. And I'm definitely not a perfect parent at all. I think one of the big things I try to teach my clients is not to, you have to do it this specific way, or you have to be this specific type of parent, but to just be yourself, be connected with yourself and be in alignment with yourself. And we're all human beings, which means that when you're being true and honest with yourself, you're also going to be making mistakes. And that's definitely the case for me. And I know before we started recording, we were talking about mom fails. And I literally was just like going through a list in my head of like, well, it's not that I'm afraid to share a mom fail. It's more like, which mom fail should I be sharing?
Yes.
And then I started thinking like the moments that I really can truthfully, honestly recognize, like that was a mistake that I was making. I actually can't really honestly call it a fail, because once I actually recognized that I was making a mistake, I did something about it and like self-corrected and learned something from that and all that stuff. So it's almost like the mom fails we're really making are the ones we're totally unaware of until we're like way down the road. So, I can think of like, for example, the most recent thing that I realized we really needed to redirect about was my daughter's school. She was going to a school that was really traditional in the way that it taught language and math. And she was having a really hard time at that school. And I have always been, I went to regular old school and it worked for me. It worked for your dad. Like, we don't need to be, our job as parents is to be teaching our kids how to navigate the real world, not putting them in a special bubble. And I'm definitely not going to be the kind of mom who has a million kids going to a million different schools and just trying to organize all these different things. But it got to the point where I really needed to recognize that I was doggedly sticking to that philosophy and turning a blind eye to who my daughter really was. And I kind of had a really eye-opening conversation with myself, I guess I would say, where it was just like, what I'm really doing right now is being fearful that my daughter needs to kind of be taught not to be herself, basically, or else she's not going to be successful. Gigi is like extremely creative, and I always joke that she's got her head in the clouds, but she blows me away with her creativity, her artistic ability, her musical ability. She just thinks about the world in a totally different way. I'd give money to be able to see the world through her eyes just one day in my life. But at the same time, I was afraid that if I put her in a different kind of school, or I kind of just let her go in that direction and not do traditional schooling, that she would suffer in life. She wouldn't be able to be successful. And finally, I just had a moment where I was like, well, what if we just actually really leaned into that with her instead? Like, it's very clear what her abilities are, and it's very clear that she's unhappy at this school. And what if we just throw caution to the wind and just like go all in on Gigi and just do what we know would make her like ridiculously happy, and just put all our cards on betting on her as herself. And it took a big leap of faith for me to do that, because the school she's in now is a free school. It's a democratic school. The education philosophy is, in Spanish, is called Educación Respetuosa y Activa, which means respectful and active. And so the children choose their own curriculum. They're never forced to study something they don't want to. It's a completely different type of education. But I realized she's only been going to that school for a few months, and I can already see she's a completely different person. Her self-confidence, her self-esteem, she's actually talking to me and studying things that I was having to like badger her to look into before. And I realize now, like, that was a big quote unquote mom fail for the last 10 years of Gigi's life. I've been trying to put her in a box, and that was a big mistake. And now I see like her potential is like limitless now. And I'm really glad that we made the decision to change. And, so that's a good example.
And it's such an interesting example. I was thinking of the time that I like went and paint my nails in the other room, and my 2-year-old is cracking open a watermelon on the floor, or that kind of thing. But I love this idea of that you brought out, that, once you shifted, once you changed gears, that it's not really a mom fail at all. It's just a learning experience. And I think when we have that idea, even if it is something as trivial as being in the other room while a mess is happening or whatever, as long as we're learning, well, then we take our kid with us. Next time we paint our nails, we're just smarter and better off every time. And we just get better and better as parents. And when we can recognize that and not, get down on ourselves for these mom fails that are going to happen every day, we just every day are learning and messing up along the way. I think that is an awesome way to look at that.
I totally agree. When I think like what I talk to my clients about all the time, and if anybody who's followed me on Facebook has heard me say a million times already, quit parenting, start modeling. So I don't think that any of us as parents would ever tell our children if they made a mistake or made a bad decision that they failed, that they're a failure, or that they failed at anything. But if we actually want them to truly look at hiccups and stumbling blocks in a more positive and growth mindset, we need to actually be demonstrating and modeling that for them. So, I really try not to just be saying that, but practice what I preach, I suppose, and also not just practice when I preach, meaning what I say to my clients, I have to live, but what I say to my kids, I have to live.
Yes. Okay. I love that. So I want to get into some of these, some of your parenting techniques and things that you teach that really work for people. And so you have 3 secrets, we're going to call them, to raising great kids. So I would love to just dive right in with number 1. What are these 3 secrets? And then let's go through them.
Yeah, so I do a whole hour-long training that has the same name, 3 Secrets to Raising Great Kids Without Losing Your Sanity, is what I like to say. And it's really just about recognizing kind of the cycle of behavior and emotion that leads us to losing our temper on our kids, or not really using effective parenting strategies with our kids. And, the first thing I talk about always is this kind of cycle of almost all, in my personal experience and professional experience working with moms, I can boil down almost every single moment that parents are losing their temper with their children to 2 things happening, which is multitasking and repeating yourself. So, there's so many times in the day when we're just we're on our phone while we're trying to get our kids to do something, or we're, trying to make dinner and help our kid with their homework and hold the baby in our arms and it really, that kind of time management, sometimes it feels like it's unavoidable. Which when my clients were here, they would say that they've already been told a million times that it is avoidable, and that's their biggest mission in life, is that they need to stop multitasking. But when we multitask, whether it's avoidable or not, it lends us this feeling of there's an emergency. We're in fight or flight the whole time, because there's just always something just right outside your peripheral vision that's like a fire that needs to get put out. And so you constantly have this feeling of like urgency, and it makes it very, very easy for one little thing to happen and you just lose your cool when you probably wouldn't if you were really just focused on this one thing in this one moment. Not to mention, like you're saying, like the example with painting your nails, it's like you're parenting and painting your nails at the same time. And, obviously, of course, if you had been in the same room as your kid, you wouldn't, that nail polish situation wouldn't have happened or whatever. All those times when it's like, if we can be 100% present with whatever it is that we're doing, half of our problems wouldn't be happening. And the same thing with this repeating ourselves all the time. Like when we're constantly repeating ourselves, we are feeling over and over again, we're getting almost like a subconscious message that we are being ignored, that we're invisible, that nobody cares what we have to say, that we're being marginalized. And that really contributes to this feeling of frustration and depletion and overwhelm and all those things. And those kinds of feelings lead us to, snapping at our kids or using totally ineffective parenting strategies like bribing our kids or threatening our kids. And we don't mean to be doing any of that stuff. It's just what comes out when you're not really thinking and acting intentionally. So the first thing I like to say is, instead of this like repeating ourselves and instead of bribing or threatening or lecturing and all these things, the real thing that is so effective for kids to learn better behavior is natural consequences. Because the most powerful and profound and lasting type of learning that a human being can have is through experience. Experiential learning will do more for your child than a lifetime of repetition and reminders. So the first key that I always talk about in that class is natural consequences. Give your child a consequence. Construct an environment in which they're able to make choices and experience what happens when they make choices in a safe and protected space. And they just will learn things so much faster. And it saves you from having to repeat yourself and all that stuff, which just eliminates that source of frustration and anger and short temper and stuff like that, because you're not repeating yourselves anymore. You say something once and you follow it up with a consequence, which is the second tip. Stop repeating yourselves. Or when I'm teaching the class, I always joke and say, shut your mouth. So that's secret number 2. Shut your pie hole. That's what I always say in my class. And then the third secret is that it's all in the delivery. So it's great to have natural consequences. It's great to make a real big commitment that you're not going to repeat yourself. But it only works if you deliver that with calm and empathetic speech and behavior. So if you lose your temper on your kids, and even if you're never repeating yourself, but you're like, well, you didn't do what I said, so now look what you've done. Now you have to have this consequence, or I'm so angry with you, or I'm so disappointed, and all of those things. It really robs us of the opportunity to give our kids that experience, because when you're not delivering your consequences, and when you're not relating to your kids with compassion and calmness and empathy, you are putting their attention on you instead of themselves. And the whole idea of the consequence, the whole idea of that experiential learning, is that they can sit there and have a reflection of, I created this for myself and I want to create something different next time. So what am I going to do next time? But if they've got somebody being quote unquote mean to them or angry or disappointed, their thoughts will instead be on, I'm kind of scared or I feel attacked, or my mommy doesn't love me because she feels disappointed in me. And all these things, of course, are not really true, but that's just the way kid brains work sometimes. And it really winds up sabotaging. And the real truth is that anger and frustration with our kids actually, in a really crazy way, reinforces their negative behaviors. So it's really important to be able to lock in that like compassionate delivery of like, this is really sad for you because you made an unfortunate decision. And I totally get it. I remember how I felt when I made this kind of decision when I was your age, and it really stinks. But you also still have to have this a consequence. So it's kind of like having that sympathy and empathy without rescuing them, if that makes sense.
Yes. Okay. So much good stuff in here.
That's like a summary of a 1-hour class in 5 minutes.
Yes. Okay. Well, good. We're going to go through a couple of these and get a little deeper and see how to apply it a little better. So natural consequences is number one. Mm-hmm. Give us some examples. I think that would help us to really see what you're talking about.
Well, like I use sometimes when I'm teaching my classes, I use some inspiration from. There's a great book out there called Love and Logic, and I think it's an amazing parenting technique. And so I use a lot of those examples from their teachings. And the example they give all the time that I really love is kids who protect their teeth by brushing get to have treats or sweets or whatever. So in our family, we can always say, desserts are for kids who protect their teeth. So if you don't brush your teeth, I'm not going to fight with you about your toothbrush. I'm not going to fight with you about brushing your teeth. I can't force you to brush your teeth. Like, I don't have that power. Like, I'm not in charge of my children's bodily functions. They're the bosses of their bodies, but I am in charge of the environment they live in. And so instead of fighting with my child and getting in a power struggle that I'm sure to win and only sure to lose and only demonstrate my ineffectiveness to my child, I instead can just say, okay, well, that's your choice. And then later on when it's dessert time, you just say, oh, but you didn't brush your teeth today, and dessert's only for kids who protect their teeth. But I bet you'll make a better decision tomorrow. Love you. It's that natural thing that comes from natural consequences. Doesn't mean you do nothing and the world just provides a consequence. It means that you are constructing an environment for your child where their choices lead to outcomes that make sense and teach a lesson through experience. So it definitely happens, especially with young children, that their consequences are engineered by their parents. It's not, with a teenager, a great example is, if they're not following the rules with their curfew or with using the car or something like that, if they're of driving age, you can just say, well, I'm happy to lend you the keys to the car the next time I feel like I can trust you, or when I feel like you're being really responsible or you can handle responsibility or whatever. Those are natural consequences. If you're misbehaving or not being responsible with the car, well, you don't get to have the car. Same thing with screen time, with older kids that have cell phones and things like that. The consequences sometimes get a lot more obvious and easier when the kids are older. It's when they're younger that we sort of have to jerry-rig their consequences for them sometimes.
Yeah, I think that is, sometimes it's really logical and it's really easy and we can see, okay, this is the obvious natural consequence, but sometimes it is a lot harder.
Totally.
Yeah. And I'm thinking of I'm trying to think of some situations that we get into, like, oh, we have a lot of brother, what's the word? Brother fights is what it is. Just brothers beating rivalry on each other. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So with something like that, tell me what a natural consequence is when the kids are going at it.
So one thing I can do with my kids when they're fighting, well, the rule in this house is if you're going to be fighting, it needs to happen away from my ears, because fighting really drains my energy and it hurts my ears. And I will tell you that obviously if your kid is actually in physical danger, there's like this behavior is truly violent, you shouldn't be leaving your child in that circumstance. But I will also tell you that I would say 95% of the time, when a parent or like authority figure is out of the picture, the behavior completely changes. My kids almost never fight when I'm not around. And I know that's easy for me to say because it's like, well, how do you know? You can't see it. But I know, like, I know because of the other care providers who are watching them. I know because my older son will be babysitting and telling me what's going on. I know because I have a nanny who talks to me when I get home. Like, your presence is not a neutral force in your children's dynamics. In fact, it's probably the most influential thing that happens. So the first thing I'll say about sibling rivalry is whenever possible, stay out of it. The second thing is what I usually do with fighting, especially if it's just bickering or wrestling or whatever. I just really just say, you know what? I just don't have, this is really, really draining my energy, which is another love and logic little secret. And I do the energy drain a little bit differently than they do. But, you know, this energy drain idea of like, when you're behaving this way, it drains my energy. And that's really all I need to say in the moment, because it's only a matter of time before you need me to do something for you. And I can just say, oh man, I used all my mall driving energy listening to you guys fight. I don't have any energy to drive you to the mall anymore, or host a play date, or have your friends sleep over, or take you to the movies, or whatever it is. Like, our children need us, and we need to provide the things that they need, but they also depend on us for all of their privileges and luxuries. And part of what this kind of parenting does is really highlight for our children what things are privileges and luxuries, and that our families are ecosystems, and they only work when all parts of the ecosystem are running healthily and well cared for. So whether that's chores or just being respectful to one another so that the family can run smoothly, it's all the same in the end.
Yes. Okay. I love that. I love that too, because it just, the whole idea of sibling rivalry, we think we have to step in, and we really we're doing more than we need to do. Letting this, a natural consequence. I haven't actually heard that about this is draining my energy, and I really like that. I'm going to use that one. Okay. I want
definitely got to give credit where credit's due on that one. That is total love and logic.
Okay. Cool. Well, I want to make sure we talk about stop repeating yourself, because how do you do it? As a mom, I mean, after I've asked once, I'm ready to ask the second time. Like, I'm already prepared. Totally. So how do you get out of that cycle and that pattern?
So really, I mean, just like all the stuff we're talking about changing our own behaviors, not our kids' behaviors. And, one thing I say when I teach that class is like, why do our kids not care what we say? Because we taught them to ignore us. They know that we're going to repeat ourselves. They know that we're going to give them another chance. They know. And that's one reason why I say no counting. Like, I know there's a lot of parenting techniques out there where they say, oh, the 3, 2, 1, or, 5 minutes till this, or whatever. But to me, that's just training your kids not to listen to you the first time you talk. And so my biggest tip to parents is to really just ask once, and say it nicely, say it as a request, whatever it is. If you're asking them to clean their room or do their chores or take out the trash or whatever it is, you ask once and that's it. And use that time that you were going to use reminding them and repeating yourself to think about what you're going to do when, not if, but when that deadline passes and they don't do the thing that you asked them to do. And it can be as simple as like, oh, I really like for your room to be clean before you go to bed. And then bedtime comes around, the room's still a mess. And you just say, well, that was a big mistake. You didn't clean your room, but don't worry about it. And the next day while they're at school, you clean their room. But when I clean my kids' rooms, they don't get the stuff back that I clean up. So, those moments, it's really about retraining yourself, just like learning any new habit. You need to learn to change the way that you respond to your child.
Yes. Okay. I'm just thinking this through. That's so great. I've heard that about cleaning your kids' rooms, and I have tried it before, but it did not work well for me because all that's in my kids' rooms is trash, and they didn't care about it anyway. So that technique did not work in our house. Really, it's legitimately trash on their floor.
I totally get it. So for when I always have this kind of dynamic with my clients of like, well, I tried this and it didn't work. I tried that and it didn't work. Our job is to get our kids invested in, we want to be promoting the motivation for their actions to be coming from within them. Like they do the things that they need to do because they actually want to do it. And so it's kind of like our little trial and error process as parents. How can we figure out what it is that's going to get our child invested? So if it's not losing the stuff from their bedrooms, it can be, once again, like, I don't have energy to do these other things for you because I used all my energy to clean your bedroom. Or it can be, there's a million ways to engineer that consequence and understand. Like, I have a client who, her daughter was obsessed with reading, which, I mean, obviously every parent's dream. We wish our kids would be like obsessed with reading, right? But for whatever reason, like that was the only consequence she could think of to really get through to her daughter, was to take her Kindle away. And she was like, I can't believe I'm doing this right now. But one day of taking her daughter's Kindle away completely transformed her daughter's behavior. And it took her a while to get to the point of recognizing, like, this is a thing that matters to my daughter. It's a thing that's going to get her invested. Because most of us as children, we learned to do the quote unquote right thing because we were either seeking our parents' approval or avoiding disappointing them. And I just don't want my kids to be doing things for that reason. And that's why that when I get to that third secret, like, it's all in the delivery. I don't never want my children to think that their behavior is going to change the way that I think or feel about them, or that I'm ever going to be disappointed in them because they made a mistake. It's really about being more with compassion for their struggle than the fact that their behavior is making me struggle.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you brought that up because there's one other thing with that last secret that you talked about of, being compassionate towards them. But you said this: anger reinforces negative behaviors. Tell me how and why that happens.
Yeah. So this is really cool. And it really was like an aha moment for me when I learned this. Human beings, all of us, not just children, we crave intensity and emotion. It's really important to us when think about anytime you tell a girlfriend what's going on with you, you don't want her to just be listening to you like a robot. You want her to be like, oh my gosh, or tell me more. That's terrible, or good for you, or whatever. We all want to feel an emotional connection. And so even your angry response to your child, even if it's a negative response, even if it makes your child kind of scared of you or cry or any of that stuff, it still is a really intense emotional response. And so on a subconscious level, your child is actually getting reinforcement for their negative behavior by being quote unquote rewarded with that high energy and intensity. And so the more that when we can just kind of be unfazed by our kids' behavior and almost this attitude of like, nothing you do or say will ever change the way I feel about you. Try me. It's completely transformational, and it translates to our children as massive confidence building because they have that foundation. Just like, a lot of us, when we first start out as parents, we do some variation of attachment parenting. And the principle behind that is forming a strong attachment bond with your child gives them this strong foundation of unconditional love that allows them to become more independent as they grow older because they know that they have that rock solid foundation with you. And to me, parenting this way that is compassionate but firm and all those things, it is an extension and a continuation of that, but obviously adjusted for a more age appropriate and nuanced comprehension that our children have as they age.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I love all this, how it works together and how it really is. A lot of times we try to change our kids' behavior, but if we can shift that and work on ourselves, we're going to see such a difference in our kids and also in the way we feel about ourselves as parents. Coming back to what we talked about at the beginning about mom fails and about a lot of us don't always feel like we're doing a great job. And yet, if we can change our own behavior and feel confident that we are doing what's best for our kids, then even when, we hit kind of rocky times and things are not always picture perfect in our home, which they're not going to be. Life is messy, right? But even when that happens, we can feel confident that we are doing the best for our kids that we can.
Absolutely. It's really not about being someone you're not, or being fake, or striving for perfection. That's total nonsense, honestly. And you're living with these people. It's not possible for you to be perfect 24/7. It's just not.
Right. They're going to see through
and
that.
And it really is. And it's just like you said, it's really about changing the way you relate to your child. It's not about trying to control or even have power over their behavior. I say all the time, in a crazy, weird way, like your kids' choices and the way they behave are honestly none of your business, in a really crazy way that's so hard for us to understand. But in this 30,000 foot level, it's like, oh, wait, they're independent people. Like, I actually can't control them. I can't control anyone but myself. So setting this task before me of controlling another person, even if it's a tiny little person that I desperately wish I could control, it's impossible. You're setting yourself an impossible task, which means you're going to fail at it. And then if you can't accept that, you're just going to feel like you've let your kid down and you're a failure as a mother, when really that was never your job to begin with.
I love it. I love it. Let's focus on the things that we can control and the things that we can, change in our own lives. If people want to get more from you, where should they go?
Well, I wanted to offer your listeners a free gift today. It's just a little free guide that I give away. It's called Free Guide to Getting Kids to Listen the First Time We Ask. And it's super easy to use. It's just a PDF. It kind of walks you through, and it's an interactive step-by-step thing. And you can find it really easily at bit.ly/mama guide. So that's bit.ly/mama guide. And I'm just excited to be here and so grateful that you gave me the opportunity to share my experience with you.
Well, perfect. Thank you so much. We'll link to that. I think that's going to be great information. I know we've learned so much today. So thank you, Anne, for being with us.
Thank you, Chanel.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to Moms Who Know. I hope you got a lot of great ideas about things that you can do to improve yourself as a parent. I know that I have some things that I want to work on after listening to Anne and talking to her. My question for you today for our podcast discussion question of the week is this: what is your best parenting secret? We got to hear from Anne today, and Anne is, she's studied a lot about parenting and she's a parenting expert, but I believe that each of us are parenting experts for parenting our own kids. There's no one who has more experience than you with parenting your own children. So what is working for you? I would love to hear about it. Share with us on Moms Who Know podcast at Facebook or Instagram, and let us know, what is your best parenting secret? I am excited to hear from you, and I'll see you next week on Moms Who Know.